record something that doesn't suck. To start recording at like 7 a.m. so we're a little less cynical.
Funny is usually harder.
Funny's way harder. Video works, audio works.
It's $3,500 chair.
Woo!
Hello, and you are listening to the Think Big and Code Small podcast. My name is Dan Horton, and I am joined with my friend and co-host, Chris Westerhold.
Aaliyah had asked, she's like, oh, did you guys record? I said, no, we did a really great podcast, though. I said, but we never hit record.
Kim said the same thing. Yeah, never hit record. We actually talked about quite a bit of stuff that maybe hopefully we can get back to today.
It's going to be a good show. Let's get on it.
Yeah, we'll see if we go around the same path. But you and I actually had a really great discussion on AI and didn't hit record.
Didn't hit record. No.
Didn't hit record.
See, we're back to the very beginning. Back to where it all started.
Like if we've never done this before.
Like we've never done it before. But it feels like we've never done it before because it's been...
I think it's
been like 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing how fast it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but even in the past 3 or 4 months, you and I have barely talked.
Not much at all.
I mean, really, from where we were a year ago versus the last 3 or 4 months, like you and I basically never talked.
No. Girlfriend used to say, that it was like we were dating. We talked more than we talked to our wife and our girlfriend.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like for the last couple months, we just so many things going on, different things. You and I barely even talked. Weeks would go by all of a sudden and we would be forcing ourselves to get on a call just so we could catch up. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at that point, you're not doing the same kind of thing. It's a different type of conversation. It's a different type of everything at that point.
Right. But for our conversation today, and the thing we were going to talk about is what we did last night, right? The AI. And it seemed like a good topic for the beginning of a year. We saw an article. There's two things because I just opened up my browser and it says ChatGPT took over the world in 2022. But since then, things have settled down. I find that to be a very funny statement from MSNBC article.
Can you define settled down?
Settled down. What does that mean? I think it's about the hype cycle, I would guess. But
yeah,
the other one was the question, and I posted it on LinkedIn of, is AI going to, bring us over to the book 1984 Orwell's utopian type of a society? And we're going to go down that path, or, was it going to be the Renaissance? Because that other article was that, is this going to be the year of the Renaissance for AI, and like all these different paths, if you remember?
Yeah, I think those are a bunch of really kind of deep philosophical questions almost. And, the biggest challenge with like AI in general, and I think this is more of like just meta commentary at this point, but peeling apart the hype versus the actual reality of today, and then thinking about the reality of tomorrow or 5 years from now is, I think, where I know I get lost in this, because I've spent a ton of time over the last couple of weeks just trying to absorb other people's thoughts and opinions on some of this. And you'll find everything from, the world's going to end. It's going to take all of our jobs, and, we're all just going to be poor beggars on the street, to this is all a bunch of nonsense hype that has almost no value to it whatsoever. And I don't know if I believe either one of those extremes. And the answer is almost always somewhere in the middle.
100%. Right. There's always extremists on each end of something. But the question is, would ChatGPT right? I need more coffee. Is it going to take over the world or help us to, the Renaissance side of it, help us to actually, enhance and expand the things we're doing going into next year? Like, it is going to go one way or another in how people use it, or it's just going to die off like, blockchain with the hype cycle, right? It's still used for things, but it had a huge hype cycle for a while and then kind of disappeared for a while. And now you see it coming back. And is AI now going to come off the backside of a hype cycle here? Because the thing I was reading yesterday, I think, was, what do we think going into next year? Are organizations today now going to be looking at all of these AI projects, all of these bets they made and going, okay, where's my ROI? Right? And then they're going to cancel projects like crazy, or they're going to put more money into some of them. Right? So are they getting the value from AI that they expected? And are they willing to take a whole nother year of just throwing money at it, hoping, or are they actually getting value?
I honestly think you're going to get a lot of cancellations.
So do I.
We have thrown AI at absolutely everything. And when, one of the interesting things that I found just kind of randomly searching through YouTube on people's feelings on AI and those kinds of things is almost everyone finds this stuff useless. And useless is a strong word there. Yeah. Almost everybody looks at this stuff and going like, okay, like, I mean, it's helpful, but is it? Like, I don't, so for example, take all of the AI generated content you see online right now. Most people absolutely hate it. You look at all these AI generated images and you've got just the internet is flooded with AI generated content. You've got, I think you mentioned this yesterday, like a 12-year-old kid acting like they're an expert in this field that takes 30 years to understand. And you can tell that they're just leveraging ChatGPT to spit out articles or whatever. And, I think you're going to, no one likes it. And I go back to like the emperor has no clothes. Okay. And no one's willing to say the emperor has no clothes. And, in this scenario that, hey, like most of this AI stuff is kind of nonsense. Like it's not valuable to me. And I think that's where the downfall of it is going to come from. Because in the end, like it's all about money, like you said. Like there is a massive amount of money that has been dumped into this stuff. And where's the ROI coming from?
That's the actual question. Where's the value? Is the value for that young kid who's writing on Medium and he's making a couple bucks a month because he's writing hundreds of articles on things he doesn't really know about? He's learning and writing the article while he's learning. So good for him for learning, or her. But, they're giving advice to people they maybe shouldn't be giving advice to, coming from ChatGPT that's guessing on its own. This could have a bad outcome. Or organizations, like you said, that are trying to build a lot of it into the system, but not really hoping for a win on something they're not really sure what they're trying to win at sometimes. Like we haven't gotten better at doing requirements and we haven't been better at understanding the outcomes we're driving towards. It's just a new tool in the same problem, but we haven't really identified those problems. So kind of where you were going with that is I'm still not going to see an ROI. I'm not going to have a huge ROI. One of the ladies we work with has a framework she uses to go and sit with executives, and she has found in her conversations, people either haven't started and can't figure out how to really start, or they're stuck on the other end and they have things running, but they can't figure out how to really productionize it. So they can't get value back from it. So they can't start or I can't finish. And no one is really into the, this is running great and I got all this productivity from it and la-di-da. And then there are people I know that are in production with it, but you don't see any articles, or I haven't seen any articles that show like this massive win from it. It's more like, oh, here's a cool way I used it.
Well, there's, this goes back to like, you'll hear the influencers talk about how valuable all of these things is. I've completely automated my job, or, I have ChatGPT as the CTO of my company and all of those types of things. And it's like, that's a bunch of nonsense. That's a bunch of nonsense. Like that doesn't make any sense. But there's a lot of people dabbling in it, which makes sense. But there's such a gap that comes from these types of things. And there are absolutely some types of roles and types of things that need to get done that this can be incredibly helpful with. But the thing that I go back to a lot on is the last mile problem.
Yeah.
And, and I think I've given this example a million times now, but I'll do it again. We've had a burger flipping machine since the 90s. And how many restaurants do you see, fast food or others, that have Burger the McFlippy burger machine in them? And to me, the main reason you don't see that is economics and the last mile problem of, okay, well, I've now bought this machine for a bunch of money. I now have to maintain machine. I have to clean the machine. I have to do all of these things that still require a human to do. So you need all of those things. You still need this human to do these kinds of things. And if I have a burger shop and I still need a human, then where's the economics of buying this machine? And those economics are bad, which is why you don't see it anywhere.
Yep.
Then the second part of that is also this philosophical part. And I believe I was in the San Francisco airport, if I remember correctly, but there was this essentially AI vending machine that would automatically make you a latte.
Okay.
And
so a coffee machine,
basically this fancy coffee machine that had these arm inside of it that would grab the cup. And it seemed like a lot of it was just artistic thing, not just but then across the way was an actual coffee place. The coffee place had a line of 20 people, and the auto coffee machine thing, there was literally nobody there. And, is the problem to be solved? Oh yeah, we just need to automate these things. Okay, well, maybe you can automate it, but does anybody actually want it?
Right. Part of getting coffee is the experience, maybe not standing in line for too long, but it's the experience. Right. Also, depending on your age, getting coffee from a vending machine was a really bad experience always, because it was usually in a spot where that was the only way to get it, like a hospital when you were waiting for something or something else. And that coffee was bad. So even though you automate that coffee into a machine, my brain might think, I'm just going to get a bad cup of coffee. I don't care how cool the machine is. So that might also be part of, why there's no line for that. And I'd rather go and sit into Starbucks and wait in line and get a coffee. Right.
Yeah. Just, in the end, and I think we as technologists kind of fall in love with our own stuff essentially. And just because it's cool, because all right, well, yeah, it's cool, but is there actually a market for it? And the answer might be no. And to go back to that kind of last mile problem of, you still need the people to maintain it and to do all of that. And you still need people around all of this thing. And, if you think about the, AI usage in some of the software delivery, you still need people to do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And this is a tool that can help you, but in the end, it's constrained in an awful lot of ways. And I don't know if the economics will ever get better on that.
I think we have to ask the question different. That doesn't happen enough. And again, it was happening before AI as well, but it's find the problem, then solve it. Don't go build all the cool stuff we want to build and then hope to find a customer. Like we're having fun building stuff and we're hoping somebody wants to use it. At some point, we need to flip that narrative and start looking for real problems. One of the things I think of, and one of the themes that's supposed to be next year is agents, AI bots, agents that are there to theoretically help extend your workforce or yourself or something else. One of them that came to mind was like Reclaim, right? Which is the apps for doing your calendar. So you can give it all the rules and how you think about how you want to manage your calendar, like moving meetings, blocking time, when is my brain time to when I'm going to do, talking meetings, or if I do one-on-ones and I have to reschedule one meeting, will it redo my calendar? So it's kind of like having your own secretary in the old days, right? And you have somebody who manages your calendar. The question becomes, is that solving an actual problem, or is it just adding noise?
Have you ever actually had like an EA or someone like that before?
No.
I have a little bit. And, when I think about something like that, it sounds good on paper. Because you're like, oh, well, I don't have to manage my calendar anymore. I don't have to book my own flights anymore. I don't have to do whatever seemingly mundane thing. But again, I'll go back to the last mile problem. Take a flight, for example. Yep. I can go onto the Delta app and say, oh, well, I want to go from St. Louis to Denver. All right, here's the 5 flights that I can pick. Pick that one, pay, move on with my life. Like, that's pretty easy. But if I'm going to use a person to do that, I now need to send them an email saying, hey, I want to go from here to there, this date around this time. And, I need to be there, whatever. And so I need to write this long prompt in air quotes to the person. And then what they're going to then say is like, oh, well, I found these 4 or 5 flights. What do you think about that? Well, I don't check my email quite as often as some, but way more than others. But all right, well, I sent them this prompt, and now a handful of hours later, they get back to me with these options. And then I can either say, oh yeah, take option 3, or none of these really work for me. The layovers are too long. It doesn't fit with whatever. Go look for something different. And so you now, instead of having this like 5-minute interaction, it becomes this day-and-a-half interaction to try to get a flight booked, which becomes this giant pain in the butt. And so now if you were to inject AI into this thing, it's like, oh, well, hey, AI, I need to book a flight from the same thing, St. Louis to Denver, these times. Oh, well, here's these options. No. And all of a sudden you're having this like conversation in air quotes with this agent to go do this thing. And it's going to take you longer and be more of a pain in the ass to do that because you're basing it on language instead of just opening up the app and taking 5 minutes to go book a flight. Like, I don't see the value in some of that. And it's like, okay, well, like maybe a little bit of, okay, well, all right, I just put a flight on my calendar. Now, hey, AI thing, go and cancel those meetings that are where my flight is plus 2 hours on each side of my flight. Go cancel all of those meetings. Well, if it's something that simple as just cancel them, super easy. But if it's not, now you run into the same problem you have again of, okay, well, you have this meeting right in the middle of your flight. Me as an AI, I don't know anything about this other than it's with this other person. So me and you are having a meeting. Well, can I cancel it? If I need to reschedule it, when do I reschedule it for? Just any other open spot on a calendar? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it needs to be done before this certain date, but that's not on your calendar.
Right.
That's in your brain that says, oh, well, this meeting is critical to this project that needs to get done by this date. So now all of a sudden you're again back into this back and forth with this AI of like, well, yeah, well, I tried to reorganize your schedule, but here's the 10 things that went wrong. And now you're having to answer all. And so again, that kind of last mile problem of how do you solve those kinds of complexities that aren't in the data set? And so now how valuable is that thing? And I would actually suggest, based on my history, that is a net negative on you. It'd be easier for you just to go into your damn calendar and say, oh, cancel. All right. Shoot a quick note to Dan saying, hey, buddy, had to jump on a flight, not going to make it Tuesday. We're going to have to chat Monday. Your calendar's completely full. Let me know when 15 minutes is you have to chat. Like injecting AI into that process, I don't see how it's helpful. There's everybody in the world's trying to do that kind of crap, but I don't see how that's exactly useful.
I agree, but for fun, I'd say there's got to be a tipping point. So if I have an AI set up that helps me with travel, the same as I would have an assistant who knows me because she's worked or he's worked for me for 10 years and now knows me, knows my choices, knows where I like to sit, knows the planes I take, has all my information. You know, they're basically like having your, what do they say, work wife or work husband, right? Like they know you, like they know your choices, when you're going to get cranky and everything else. So they know you. If the AI has enough data based on what I normally choose, then is there a tipping point? Does it get smarter at putting those things together? And I do think it's possible to go against my own statement. Then I think there's a problem, like you just said, where now you're asking me to give it so much data. I'm spending hours training this thing, where it would be faster for me to just go do it again.
Yeah. You end up spending all of your time writing prompts in air quotes. Like whether it's a prompt to the AI or it's a prompt to another human to do these things, like, and you end up spending all of your time writing that out. And, yes, it can learn things about you and your preferences, but I would also suggest that there's a lot of times those preferences just get tossed out. Because, guess what? I like to fly Delta. They seem to have nice staff. They've got a good app. They fly out of St. Louis really well. Those things are great. And I prefer to fly Delta. But guess what? Sometimes if I'm especially if I'm flying from basically small city to small city, if I needed to go to Cleveland, I would have to fly from St. Louis to Atlanta to Cleveland. Not the greatest, but if I fly Southwest, I can fly from St. Louis to Cleveland. I almost guarantee you. And based on the other things that are going on inside of my calendar for that week, that might be the best option. And how are you going to ever give that much information to a third party, again, whether it's an agent or a human, to understand what that is without having this humongous back and forth that is more frictionful than just doing it on your own?
Right. But that's why I say it's time, right? So whether you're teaching an AI over time or a real person who's learning over time, it's time. Because if I always, to your point, I like Delta. So if I'm always flying Delta, and I prefer flights that are later in the day because I have to, kill myself to get to the airport. And I don't want to keep getting up at 3 a.m. to run to an airport. I'd rather fly the night before or later in the day for a flight, let's say. I'd rather not have connections. And, I have rules. I like these rules. I want an aisle seat. I don't want to sit in the middle. I can't work. I'd rather an aisle, and I'm left-handed. So I want to be on the right side of the plane, right? Those kind of rules you might put in place.
Yeah.
You might tell somebody and you have the overhead of doing that the first time, but then that person remembers these things, right? And they're helping you as you go forward. The AI could do the same. You have the overheads the same. And you have the ability to lose them. So one person could quit or leave. And the AI could crash. You got to retrain it again. But I think there's a lot of synergies between both, which I also think is why people look at it and say, oh, okay, this could replace my job, which it's not. And, you know, it could take on other jobs where people could then go learn new skills and do something else. Like they feel like it could take on basic jobs, which again, today we don't see that happening. I don't think that's going to happen this year at all. Kind of like your flipper.
Well, I think a good example of this is if we remember back from, well, it's probably 5 years ago now, but the proliferation of Alexa and the Googles and all of these little smart speakers, you know, they had this promise of like, you know, especially like Alexa, oh, you can just order stuff on Amazon directly from this thing. Who in God's green earth has actually done that? Other than maybe like reordering something you've already ordered, and to be like, hey, listening device that's super creepy in my living room, listening to me all the time. Can you order me 16 penny nails, 3 inches long? Like you're going to try to order this very specific thing without validating the, oh, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah. I think they were thinking more groceries, but
still like even.
Yeah. They've had funnier things happen with it. I just sent you the link for it too. Most of the time I see that, you know, and I can't say it because she'll answer me right now, but
of course
the device itself, the bird will talk to it. And there's more than one instance now of pets who can also speak, or young kids who will order food, things like that. There was a parrot a couple of years ago that realized how to order its treats. And when the family wasn't home, it would keep ordering more and more treats. So these boxes were coming to the house, and the family couldn't figure out why until they finally recorded the bird and realized the bird is ordering on the device. Yeah. Not very helpful, right? Like the idea of it being useful was great, but I guarantee if you ask people, they only use like 1% of it. You know, like I have it in the house. The only thing I use it for is to allow me to turn some lights on and off if I decide I want to say that I want like a light on, or a TV I can turn on by voice, or, you know, that kind of stuff. Like I don't
play music.
I ask the weather. Like that's about it.
Yeah. And, you know, can you do those things on there? Yeah, you sure can. Is there mass appeal for that? The answer is no. No. I don't have any statistics in front of me, but I know the vast majority of people with all of those devices do exactly what you're talking about. They play music, they turn on lights or some basic kind of automation like that. Yep. Yeah. And that's it. And so you now have this basically, you know, expensive listening device that you can play music on. Okay, you also have your phone. Why do you need this other device for that? And it's why, you know, you've seen that type of thing not exactly fade away, but it's kind of just turned into this other device that is useful in certain ways, but is not incredibly, you know, useful in others. And I think AI is going to follow that same type of pattern of it's useful for certain things, but it's also not incredibly useful for other things.
Yeah.
Like take the travel example for, you know, so say I was taking a trip to India for the first time. Hey, what is a good flight pattern to get from St. Louis to Mumbai? How long does it take? What should I think about for this type of travel? What are the documents that I might need when I get to India? Like that type of thing that's where it can be incredibly valuable. You know, to answer those types of questions, which are interesting, but in the world that everything runs around from money, like everything is all monetary driven, that type of answer isn't going to deliver tons and tons of money to people other than Google and the search engines of the world. Like
you would have to create basically a AI travel agent that was a subscription service that took care of all of that work for you to make money off of those types of things.
That'll never happen if the generic ChatGPT or Claude or whatever can answer a lot of those questions for you.
Google will take care of it. If I type it into Google right now, the top of the search engine page now gives you an output from their AI. So you probably could get that answer right there in the browser page. The other problem in that would be, is it lying? So even though you just asked it all that information, most of them are still generating a response. They're not finding it sometimes. They're generating it because you want an answer. So it's going to give you an answer. Might not be the right answer, but it's going to give you an answer. So does it tell you something and it's actually wrong? And because you don't go validate it, because you blindly follow these things, right? Now you're overseas and in a spot, and now you're missing key pieces of information you need, or you've done something you're not supposed to do. What is it, like spitting in the street in like Indonesia or something like that, or China or something is like actually a felony or something?
Singapore has some really, really high bar for social things like that. You don't do that. You don't do those kinds of things. But you know, my first trip to India, I made some of those mistakes. I did not have all the right paperwork, and I almost didn't get in the country, even though I was standing there at 3:00 in the morning trying to like, please, sir, let me in. Like, you know, so I mean that can happen either way. But to the point you were making, or at least where I thought you were going, is, you know, is it correct? Maybe, but you still have to validate all of those things, because in the end, you know, just like working with an EA or whatever, it's that kind of last mile problem of, you know, all right, well, you know, I either need to actually go action on this thing because I don't want it to action for me, or I need to go validate information. I have to go do something. And so in the end, where is the line drawn between this thing is useful or helpful, but it's not actually making a lot of these things truly better?
And is it actually making it faster? So how many things do you create? How many responses do you get back that you have to go revalidate? And because you're validating it, you're now spending extra time, where if you just went and searched it the first time, you would have gathered, collated, and put that information together yourself, like you said. Or are you using an app, like we said earlier, and the app is actually creating more work, not less work? You know, I think about the writing with ChatGPT that, like we were talking about last night, with a lot of the kids using for Medium and other things, and they're creating vanilla drafts of content that either they're just posting and no one's reading, or no one's getting real value out of, to a point, or they're rewriting the whole thing after spending all the time creating the prompt to create the first draft, because the first draft is so generic. They're looking at it going, oh, okay, you know, this is useless. Let me fix it. Then the question becomes, was it worth the time to write the first draft with AI, with ChatGPT? Maybe just research would have been better, but instead of writing the whole thing out.
I've seen that same kind of pattern starting to bubble up more on Reddit, on some of the kind of the software development subreddits and those kinds of things about, hey, here's this gigantic, clearly ChatGPT like question. And it's like, okay, this thing is like 1,500 words long. Like, I am not reading all of this to help answer whatever question you have here. And it's like, ask the damn question, man. Like, if you're really trying to why are you going through all of this? And then you want me to go read all of this and then answer back in some way. Like, this is not, you know, and I guess this leans into one of the other kind of fallacies of some of this is all of this data is human driven.
Yeah.
Like, for these AIs, you had to suck up all of the information humanity's ever created in less than honest ways if we're going to be
honest
truthful about it. And without humans continuing to curate this information, it's not going to be able to get a lot of this stuff right.
Well, it's what we said. It's going to be vanilla. It's going to be normalized. And because it's going to become so normalized that there's no new answers, there's no different ways of thinking, there's no creative thought behind it. It's everybody's going to get the same message. Everyone's going to get the same thing. It's what is it called? Like normalization of thought or something like that. Standardization of thought.
Well, it's the tendency to fall back towards the mean, and everything will be the same essentially. And if, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to accomplish this meaningless, mundane thing? Or are you actually trying to do interesting sets of stuff to differentiate yourself? And if you think that ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other things are going to give you this profound thing that no one's ever thought of, boy, you couldn't be more wrong.
Yeah, it can help you to think about things you already know, and you could brainstorm a little bit to see if it says something different. So you can use it as a sounding board maybe. Yeah. But no, it's not going to teach you something it's not going to find you something that no one ever has ever found. Like, it's not going to become some sage that has these wise words, because it figured out the meaning of life.
Well, there's experience to that. And I think a good example is like when you were younger and, as a guy, like you look up to your dad and you want to understand. And so you're young and you're trying to learn and you're listening to what is being said. And while some of it might be wise, some of it might not be, you don't even have the experience to understand what's being said most of the time.
You can't process it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're trying to learn, but you're not really learning because you don't have the base set of experience to be able to make that happen. And when I think that type of problem is what's happening in a lot of software development organizations, especially with younger developers. They don't have the experience to know better, and they're becoming very quickly very reliant upon these GPT models to give them code, and they don't know really what the hell this thing's actually doing. They just know that it kind of works. Yeah. And you end up causing more harm than good. And I think basically all of the numbers are starting to show that of, yes, people are using these models more and more, but for the people that are using these models, they're injecting something like 40% more bugs into production. And that's not exactly surprising.
Most likely those teams are having a harder time debugging it too, because to your point, they don't actually know what the code is doing. They're just pasting and copying the code in.
That's right. And, if you think back 10 years ago about what would you say to a developer if they copy and pasted code from Stack Overflow?
That was a no-no. That was
you would tell that person they were the dumbest human alive. Like, what in God's green freaking earth are you doing? And we have somehow moved into this space of blindly copying and pasting Stack Overflow into our code bases without understanding exactly what it's doing. Yeah. And now not only is that becoming, is it becoming like commonplace, it's being pushed. And it's being pushed by a lot of people that don't really understand the ramifications of exactly what's happening.
They just want they want developers to be faster, and they don't understand the ramifications of what it's going to do. Yeah.
Well, and the biggest fallacy that I've seen over the last year is the thought that the biggest problem we have in software development is we need faster typers. That is almost never the problem.
Right, which is the Kevorkian keyboard. We need to go away from the typing keyboard we have here and go to the Kevorkian, I think it is.
Yeah,
people don't realize that the way the keys are set up on the typewriter was Dvorak, maybe, yeah.
Dvorak,
yes, that's it.
Dvorak, yeah. It's been a minute since I've talked about a different freaking keyboard layout.
Yeah, like a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
People don't realize, especially nowadays, because we don't see them anymore, but the keys are laid out this way to slow down typing on an actual typewriter, because the old heads that used to hit the paper would get stuck if you type too fast. So the keyboard is made to slow you down.
And you know, to think that the problem we have in software engineering is we need faster typers just really couldn't be more wrong. It's complexity. It's all of the stuff that comes from these distributed systems that we've built, and in a lot of ways are not unnecessary, but we've built all of this really complex stuff, this really complex logic, all of the things that make your business run. And we think the thing that we need is faster typers. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. The use of AI to try to solve problems that weren't fixable before, because we think it's just going to fix it without understanding how we're actually fixing it. No matter what the problem is, people problem, process problem, technology problems. That's where it's scary. There was an article, Economic Times, indiatimes.com was the site here. And it says, ChatGPT caught lying to developers. The new AI models that they were creating tried to save itself from being replaced or shut down. So when the AI model realized that the developers were going to turn it off, it started changing its answers and modifying what it was doing, because it was understanding enough that it was going to be turned off and replaced. Like, that's pretty wild.
So I think that brings up another really kind of interesting point that a lot of people don't necessarily either want to admit or don't understand, which is these models are black boxes.
Yeah.
We have no idea how these things work. Like, let's just be really clear about that. And it's not you or I. It is no one understands how these things work. We just know that, hey, we can build this neural network and we can adjust these dials, and then we get some interesting shit that comes out on the other side.
Right.
And yes, while that is a wild simplification, it is not wrong. OpenAI has no idea how this works. Anthropic has no idea how this works. No one knows. And there are a lot of people that are still under the impression that this is a logic-based system like computers have always been. And that just couldn't be more wrong.
Right.
Because I think what you called out there is a perfect example of, okay, well, you know, if I say, hey, give me code on how to whatever, it's going to give me code. But you have to essentially treat it more like a human. Like, it doesn't really have real reasoning, at least not in my opinion. Like, yes, it's you know, text predictor, and you can make these philosophical arguments that humans are just text predictors as well. But like, I don't want to get into that. But you know, if you think about these kind of models as just being a logic box, like we've built in the past, of if I ask it a question 1,000 times, I'm going to get the same answer 1,000 times. Like, no, there is a good chance that if you ask that thing 1,000 times the same question, at some point it's going to be like, no, I don't want to answer anymore. Like, I already told you, dummy, quit it. And so how do you make that go away? The answer is you can't, in my opinion. Like, you can. And so if you now have, you know, you've moved from an unfallible to a fallible system. And okay, are you then going to base your whole livelihood as a company on this system that is fallible? I would suggest the answer to that is no.
Right.
Because at least the humans, like you can go to a human and say, boy, man, you done fucked up. Like, don't do that again. But with these types of things, especially like with, like earlier talking about like the last mile problem, like you could almost, instead of calling it that, you can call it an air gap of like, all right, well, we at least have this air gap to stop this thing from doing something really stupid that might have a material
some
impact.
Organizations only delivered code to a staging environment, and then it was manually moved into production instead of just automating everything out into production, as they wanted that last mile to be finally reviewed and seen by an actual group of people, and to make sure it was safe before they, screwed up production. So same idea.
Yeah. But if you think about I've had, a GPT model create this code for me, and it only understands the code, not the business logic or anything else. Like,
yeah, it's missing a lot of context that we expected it's going to know.
And so even if it were to create working code, and you now move that into staging, and then you have a human check it, they now have to like dig really deep to understand what's actually happening. And so is that actually any faster? I think the answer to that's probably no.
Right.
Because it's predicated on the fallacy of we need faster typers.
Yeah, it's a law of diminishing returns, though. I'm going to spend my time on a problem somewhere. So maybe it gets me past the first hurdle, but it might cause 3 new ones. So then I might spend all that time dealing with something else down the road instead of where I did in the beginning.
Right. It's like doing PRs, and you're needing to look at someone else's code, understand their logic, understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then determine, is this the best way to do X, Y, or Z?
Yeah. So a good example in my head is I decided the other day I wanted to play around with React inside of Electron and see if I could do a desktop based application, a React application running inside the framework. And I'm like, okay, I don't know exactly how I want to set this up. Like, what's the best way to go and everything else? I said, okay, I'll try and test AI. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, okay, this is my environment. I want to run React. I want to use Electron to put it on the desktop. I believe this is the best model. What other things are out there? It helped me, gave me some other options, whether I wanted to use, React or something else, maybe go to Python and use something else for an interface. I was looking for something that could do a really fast interface build to build out a mock-up, right? I wanted to mock something up. So it goes, oh, okay, use a boilerplate. There's actually Electron React boilerplate. And I'm like, okay, great. It did give me some of the scripts and things I needed to run to quickly pull some of the stuff down and run it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is actually useful. This just saved me some time going to search the web. So how to set up the environment took me a couple minutes, and that was great. What it couldn't help me with was there was a bug in the template, the package that I brought down, that the version of that and the version of Visual Studio I was using didn't align. That took me time to go hunt down and find an answer out on, I think, Reddit somewhere. One person who was like, oh, yeah, if I did this and this, it worked. Oh, okay, finally. Right. AI couldn't help there. So AI, I don't know if it did or didn't, but it didn't help to actually make that better. So the reason I bring the example up is every young developer who doesn't even understand those environments now is going to do the same thing. They don't know how to debug it. They don't know how to set it up. Now they're going to be afraid to go ask a senior person for help because they don't want to say maybe that they used AI, right? Maybe they're getting paid well for the job and they're like, oh, I don't want to lose my job because they think I don't know what I'm doing. And like, that normal process. Yeah. So, yeah, but it was in my opinion, it was a very good example, me running through it, seeing can AI really help? Because I would say every time I've ever asked it for code, the code doesn't work and I have to debug all the code anyway.
I would say and again, like this goes back to like the lowest common denominator. It can really help with the basics, but you have to know what to do after that. Well, and kind of like what you said, like, yeah, like it can give me this base set of code. Great. Like, okay, well, one of the things that I've talked about forever is providing people with good starter kits. Great. It can help you kind of automate starter kits. Fantastic. Well, that is the base level of getting something done. Then on top of that, you then need to start actually adding in things that matter. Like you run into architecture pattern problems. You run into all of these different things of, are you building microservices? Are you building a monolith? What are you trying to accomplish? At what scale? And it's never going to be able to answer any of those questions. Because if you think about the example,
to answer it correctly, it can tell you what it is, but not why to pick it. Right.
Right.
But that's where the experience is. And even to point you just made a second ago, pair programming comes back into my mind is, don't have AI be your pair. It shouldn't be teaching you how to code. There's so many developers coming into, the technical domain that don't know how to do the basics. They use the tools, they do whatever. There's a lot that are still very good, right? But it's going to cause more problems because they're going to start building bad designs. We're going to go back to the models where, systems are full of spaghetti code, right? They're not designed correctly. They're impossible to manage, and there's still not enough developers to manage all of it. And it'd basically be impossible to debug or correct even, right?
Well,
as I'm saying that, I think about some of the tools that are out there for looking at the old legacy systems, and they actually will walk through all of the old RPG code or, some of the old systems and try to give you a map of the system itself. And that to me might be more useful.
Yeah, I guess I put a lot of that stuff in air quotes because I'm going to give a construction example. So like next to our house, they're building a new house. So we've been watching them do it. And my wife doesn't know really anything about construction. And when we moved in here, they had a foundation, just a pure foundation sitting there. And I told her, I was like, within about a week and a half, you're going to have a house there. Like they're going to build all of the rough framing of that house. And it is going to look like a house in less than 2 weeks. And she's like, oh my God, no way. And I'm like, yeah. It's going to go really, really quickly. Then what's going to happen is it's going to look like nothing changes for the next 2 months. Because that's when you got to add in all the electric and the plumbing and all of the details that go into making that thing happen. And, one of the challenges I see with a lot of this stuff is like, just like with the construction example, things can happen really quickly and go, wow, look at all of that. Like, is it useful? Yeah. Like with a house, like you absolutely need framing, but like you need a hell of a lot more than that. And with some of these legacy systems, or even with some of these other things, like, yeah, it can kind of give you a rough outline of stuff, but in the end, you're needing to take and pick that whole thing apart from a legacy perspective, or from like a new perspective. You have to make all of those decisions, and it's really not going to do all of that for you. And so even if you can point an AI at some legacy COBOL code and say, hey, like, give me a rough understanding of what this does. Like, in the end, you're still going to have to go answer all of those details, and you're going to end up learning all of that anyway. And so, yes, you can give this kind of quick overview of like, hey, look at all this cool stuff. But there is nobody on the face of not nobody. There's very few on the face of this earth that is going to say, hey, AI, go read all this legacy code, like COBOL code, write it into Java, and then I'm just shoving that stuff into production. That'll work just fine. Like, nobody's doing that.
Tools from AWS and a couple other companies that are trying to do that.
Of course they are.
The rewrite is not going to be perfect. And, it's... it would not make me comfortable. Like, I would not want to just run that and then go recreate the system. I use it to understand the system. That'd be great because, we have aging workforce problems and there are not a lot of people who understand those systems anymore. So having a tool that can go understand the system so I can redesign it and rebuild it is great. But not letting it just do it on its own and hope for the best.
Well, you have all of the same, is it right problems? And to confirm, is it right? You now have to go do all of that due diligence anyway.
And if you even need it, most of those old systems, you might not even need the parts of the system that are running. And to recreate it and bring it over for no reason, that's stupid.
It is. It's a waste of money.
You should assess the whole thing.
Well, and it's why very few have actually gone through and done that kind of work.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really expensive. It's really time consuming, and it currently works.
Yeah. I also think that people should, and it has quieted down, but people should stop saying that you have to get rid of all of your old legacy systems because some of those still run better than the cloud. Like the high processing on a mainframe, some jobs require you to be on a mainframe local somewhere, not in the cloud. And
who would have thought that someone that sells compute services would be desperately wanting you to move off of the systems that currently work to go buy more compute services from them? Who would have thought?
Go figure.
I mean, it's almost like they have a bunch of reasons for you to want to do that. And none of it has to do with the success of your company.
No, only theirs.
But in the end, I think there's there's so many valuable uses for some of these things, overall. But in the end, there's so much complexity to what we do that I don't know in a reasonable time frame are we going to get to a place where these things become more useful than they are right now? Because from the legacy code example, we've been talking about getting rid of COBOL for 40 years.
Yeah. And it's not going anywhere.
And, the where AI is the most useful is in greenfield projects. It's you can spin up this greenfield thing. You can do all of these, but that is 5%, 10% of most companies' yearly spend.
Yeah.
Most of it is all on these legacy systems that run the business. They make the business run and operate. Super complex. They've got all of this business logic built in, and are, when people start to realize it's not an easy button, and you're ending up with a lot of bugs and problems. And what the Dora report said this year, basically no one's seeing real value at the enterprise level. Engineers are going faster. These things are making people faster, but at the highest level inside of an organization, you're basically seeing no productivity improvement. Are people going to continue to keep paying millions of dollars a year for some of these tools? Maybe.
We've moved the pain around is all we've actually done. So we might have made developers faster, to your point, but the work they were doing in the beginning to learn and write the code is now in the debugging and the configuration and things like that. So all we're doing is moving the needle around or moving the ball around, right? We really haven't scored. We haven't gotten it to the goal yet. And I still think organizations are not sure how to do that.
They're not, because it's complexities of your ecosystem that are causing these issues. And the question I would ask to a CXO of anything is, would you rather spend the time up front to solve a problem, even if it's slower, or would you rather have more bugs inside of your production systems? And, I don't think many would say they want more production outages.
Right.
But that's what's happening.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because they're trying to see, it goes back to a whole nother problem, which would be actually a great topic maybe for us, but right. It's the way we build software, right? When we build, and I don't mean physically building it, but even in running project plans and timelines and all these other things, we force the work into chunks and blocks to show ROI really fast. It's still been a problem. That's why Agile and everything else came out years ago. It's not a fixed problem. As you and I did a couple months back in the podcast, all the problems we've seen over the last 30 years are still here. They just give them different names, but we've never actually solved any real problems we have in the technology space. We keep trying, but we really haven't. And, one of them is that, like, we still think from a mindset that says, I need to get this out in 3 months. You have a date to finish this. The work might need more time, or you need less features, but there's choices. So we've taken AI and thrown it in the beginning and said, I'll make my developers faster to fix the problem that I want this in 3 months. So you're still getting it maybe in 3 months now with more features. But to your point, I've just added in more overhead. So I have more tech debt and I have more garbage in this, and it's only going to run for 6 months before it falls apart. So that I really win. I agree with what you're saying. And I think it's coming from that business side of it, saying that we need to get value faster. I don't care, put the tools in everybody's hand, let them do it. I don't care because they can't see it. It's a black box. No one but the developers knows what's running underneath.
And, again, it's not faster typers. It is removing the complexities of the software delivery lifecycle. Make their jobs easier, make them more efficient. And, that to me is the way to solve it. And yeah, you can leverage AI tools to help make people faster. But the reason you don't see it at that high level is because your organization has lots of issues in how it actually decides what it's going to do, what problem it is, all of those things. And in the end, your developers are just the last one in the chain. They're the one holding the bag at the end. And you can waste all of this time and effort on these project plans and spend 6 months building this project plan and then give developers 3 months to do it. And then when they don't hit the date, you can stand there and shake your fist and go, why didn't you hit my date? You said that you could have this done, even though I was holding a gun at you and saying, this is only going to take you 2 months, right? Well, no, it actually is probably closer to 2 years. It's 2 months, right? Okay. And then guess what? Everything doesn't work right.
Into it, right?
Yeah. And so, will AI solve that problem? No, it won't.
Nah, not at all.
Valuable tools. Yes. Super valuable to help, but it's a double-edged sword. And if you don't, clean up your software delivery lifecycle, there's nothing you're going to do. You're going to be stuck in the same problems that you've had, and you're never going to get out of it. And, you're going to spend $3 million a year on Copilot, and you're going to see next to no value come from it.
Yeah. Yep.
There you go.
It's going to be an interesting year, I think, with AI overall. I think we'll see bots. I think we'll see more and more automated tools, but smaller specific tools like the calendar, email summarization, which we talked about the other day. All these tools to try to make things better. I don't think they're going to make a big impact, but I think we're going to see more of them. I do think we're going to see organizations that are saying, okay, show me the money. So from a business side, we're going to see organizations saying, hey, teams, I've given you a ton of time and a ton of money. Where's my value? Where's my actual ROI coming out of this? I think that the last thing in there, which was interesting in an article I was reading, was around ownership and leadership, like we just said here at the end, on running projects. So how am I changing my leadership style and techniques, and how am I working with teams? How am I validating and running and moving all this forward? So how we lead projects, how we lead people, how we think about all these tools and allow them in or don't allow them in. I think a lot of that has to change over the year too, because they're going to be forced into every nook and cranny of everything we do in our lives, whether it's, work or play.
Yeah, but we've been saying that for years. Those things have nothing to do with AI.
No, but AI is just a new shiny object.
Yeah, because in the end, go be a good leader. Go, do all of those things. Will AI be the catalyst towards making some of that happen? I doubt it.
It will be interesting when we see what ends up being the win, what ends up being that final, what ends up being that final tool or pattern or technique or something where people go, oh, okay, now I'm getting value from this, or as there isn't one. And maybe it's just the microbot thing where I'm creating mini tools to take care of small, specific tasks. You had mentioned actually when I thought last night when you and I were talking about asking it to ask you questions based off data that you had. And I thought that was great because if you taught it how to do Socratic questioning and its job was to help you think critically, now it's a useful tool. And I thought that pattern was very smart in that way of you're changing what it's doing. Instead of it just feeding you data and you just consuming data, you're taking it and turning it around and going, no, I want somebody to validate my knowledge. So I see where the gaps are, because in life, we know that questions are more important than answers. Mm-hmm. Having good questions is better than all the answers.
I agree. Totally agree with you. The challenge with that is very different than how a lot of people are thinking about AI, because they're thinking about AI as like, oh, this thing can go just do stuff for humans. And what basically we're suggesting there is that AI is making the humans better, but the humans are the ones actually doing a lot of the work still. And, I think for some kind of smaller things, like, yeah, there's helpful ways of understanding things, like, oh, I have this whole set of logs, like, go look through these logs and tell me, like, provide me some analytics on these logs.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you need an AI to do that? Probably not. But, that could be helpful. Hey, I want to use this, I need to interact with the Kubernetes API. Like, okay, that's a very common thing. It's a very solved problem. Yeah, I can help you with that. Yes, but in the end, like, you're augmenting humans, not replacing humans.
Right.
And
I think the augmentation, I think, is the power.
A lot of the current, like, tech bro, easy button thinking is that's not what's actually going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to be able to, how many people are saying it? Oh, we're going to fully replace engineers with AI. No, you're not.
No,
you're not. Like,
no. And AI doesn't make stupid people smart. So this is not going to replace anything or anyone at any time. There's a level of, we had a conversation with someone a couple months back now, and it was the critical thinking point, right? AI can generate text, but it's not doing critical thinking. And even though they're trying to design neural networks like the brain and create all this fun stuff, and like that part's cool, it still doesn't do critical thinking, at least not the ones we're using. So, you need a person, you need somebody who can take all this data and look for the one-offs, look for the uniqueness, look for the patterns no one else sees.
Well,
right?
Look at the accomplishments and air quotes that they always throw out. Oh, well, this new model can pass the bar.
Yeah.
Well, God hope so, because, passing the bar is essentially being able to regurgitate a bunch of information from the past. Like,
right, that you've memorized.
That you've memorized. That should be right. That should be right in your alley of things that you should be really good at. Oh, well, you can analyze a whole bunch of X-rays and find differences between them. Okay, I would hope you'd be very good at that, much better than humans. But when it comes to, like you said, critical thinking and those other pieces, it ain't it. It's not going to give you anything that is so revolutionary that it's going to, in the end, go make you a bunch of money.
Right. There's Stanford University did a paper that's out here, a 100-year study on artificial intelligence. And they said in the last 5 years itself, the areas where we've had any kind of progress were really just increase in vision, speech recognition, and generation. So chat GPT, generating text, natural language processing, image and video generation, multi-agent systems, planning, decision-making, and innovation of vision and motor control for robotics. And that's it. Like, that's generally where it is. Those are not huge business wins. They can be in the context of building something else, maybe, like the robotics and things like that. But we're still very new in all the things we're doing here, and even how we're using it. We need to be careful how we decide we want to stuff this into things. My fear, and it's another chat we should have next, but is going to be what happens when we get the quantum computers plugged into more of this, where, millions of years of processing can be done in like an hour. And we create a black box system like this here, plug it into that system, and now it is learning on its own, well beyond, what we can control and manage. Then it gets scary, maybe.
Yeah. I guess we'll save that for another one, because I think there's a whole like layer of ethics and, like leaning into the doom and gloom that some people are talking about. But that's a whole separate.
That's what I'm saying. It could be a whole other podcast. That's a good one.
Yeah. But I think this is interesting. This has been fun. I'm glad we're back. I'm glad we've actually, back to being able to create some content and get some things out there.
We haven't, you said it earlier in the chat today, and we haven't had the time to sit and talk like this. And you and I used to do this almost daily, even though we didn't record it daily. So it's nice to get back to having just fun and interesting conversations on different topics.
Yeah. So I think this is a good place to start for the year. And, I think that 2025 will still be, AI will still be a big topic, but we'll see where it goes when it comes to how it's actually implemented and where it lands. But it's what's reality versus hope and desire. But other than that, it's been a good time, man.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And we'll chat again soon.
Until next time.
All right. Cheers.
See ya.